Recording in progress.
Okay, we'll call to order the May 18th, 2022 regular board meeting of the Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority. First item is the roll call. Cindy, please go ahead.
Okay, John,
Present.
Carson,
Here.
Skippy,
Present.
Kelly,
Here.
and Allison.
Here.
Better?
All right. And next item on the agenda is public comment. I don't have anyone here in person. Do we have anyone online with public comment?
Ooh, Tom's fancy.
And Rachel's here.
Right, I got that.
Tom's got a tie on. That's what I'm saying.
He had court.
I still look like a hitman.
All right, so not seeing any public comment, we will close that portion of the meeting and move to executive director's comments and a staff update.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Gillen, Executive Director of APCHA. So I have a couple things later in the agenda, but at the top of the meeting, I just wanted to let everybody know we have extended an offer, and she's accepted it, for a qualification specialist, so that's great, which will relieve some of the burden. Cindy and Bethany have been working very hard doing qualifications for the past month or two. So that's really good news, and we hope to get her on board at the beginning of, well, we are getting her on board at the beginning of the month, and she's an APCHA resident and well known among the office staff and well regarded, so we're very excited about that. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is tomorrow at noon, we're doing our second Facebook Live open house, or should I call it Casa Abierta
There it
Virtual. Vamos a hablar en español. So we're going to be doing that, and it's not just me. We have a real live native Spanish speaker, Julia Peralta, for our staff, and we're grabbing her before she goes on a maternity leave. So we're getting one in tomorrow at noon. So you can all brush up on your Spanish tomorrow at noon on Facebook. And then I'll got a few other things later on the agenda. So thank you very much for that.
And I just needed to just remind everybody that right now, we don't have any rentals except for our tax credit, which we always have, which we're always advertising because we always have units available for those. So if anybody's interested, please go on our website. And we will start having on Friday a 2-bedroom Category 3 at Martha's and Nostell available to purchase.
Where is that, Cindy?
It's over
Parking
by
lot.
No Problem Joe. Come on, let's see. It's over on the east side. How do I explain it?
It's like kitty corner from Park and Park.
Yes.
But like kind of tucked in there.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
Spencer's old
It's
place.
one of the oldest
yeah.
projects that we have.
That's how I know where it is.
Got it. And then, sorry, Carson, can I?
Go ahead.
On the LIHTC projects, have we, I'm curious if we're generating any incentives that we talked about for people who live in other Category 1 units but might qualify to move into the LIHTC units, to incentivize them to move, so we can open up the category units.
The only
with
Category
which
1
are less
projects,
restrictive.
well, like the rental projects that we have are Smuggler. Those 11 units there. And I don't know, we haven't reached out besides keeping it in the paper and putting it in Spanish, putting it down Valley. We haven't reached out to any of our Category 1 people if they're interested. I don't think we have any lists like that we can actually reach out to Category 1 people on that. We can check and see, but I don't think we do.
I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean?
On Home Track, to send out an email.
You have a rent roll?
Well, but the thing of it is that we may not know, it might have been a year and a half that they've qualified, and they may no longer be Category 1, or that income, that lower income.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. Just kind of a generic question for you, Cindy, on the rental applications. When do you notify people if they have not qualified because they have too much income or something like that to get in?
When they when they qualify.
I'm talking about the vacancies now that we have, not requalification or people already in the system. I just wondering, because I had encouraged someone at City Market who seemed like they and their family, young family, might qualify. I believe they applied, but last I talked, they said they hadn't heard anything back in a couple of weeks. So, and so I'm just kind of wondering, and I also am very cautious of my position on the board to, not want to check in on any applications, but I was just wondering how quickly do people hear back that they don't qualify?
It should be
or-
quicker
or
than
if they
that,
do?
Rachel. There's either a glitch or something. So if you do know the name, pass it on to us and we'll check. But it should be quicker than that.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I'll
Yeah.
give that directly to you, Matthew.
Yeah. Because say you could give us his name and we can check.
Yeah, I mean, either
the
something
only
went
thing I can
wrong
tell you.
or there was something else, but it should be much quicker than that.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And we'll dig down on that LIHTC question and see what we can do.
Matthew, it's Bethany. Can I just jump in really quickly?
Of
Rachel,
course,
I
Bethany.
think probably what happened is that when we receive applications, we put them in priority of longest work history because there is still that caveat with the
Sure.
LIHTC properties. And so if someone is being qualified above them, we might not be able to drop it down. So it could actually be taking a couple weeks, and that might actually be valid because there's someone above them that we are currently trying to qualify to move into that
Right.
unit. And then it trickles down because we wouldn't look at their application necessarily until it got to that point. So
Yeah, and that's what I was assuming, something like that might be happening, but I was just kind of wondering, how do people know, or do we notify them to say, you're still in the queue, we haven't gotten to your application, or anything when there is that inherent time delay?
of course, makes sense.
But I don't think we do that. We don't send them emails saying we got that doesn't automatically send something, thank you for your application, we'll get in touch with you or anything like that. I don't think.
No, they just get a confirmation.
Yeah.
That they get it, okay.
Okay. If there's nothing else from staff update, we will move to the consent calendar. Minutes of the May 4th regular meeting. Looking for additions or subtractions, changes, or a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the minutes of May 4th.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay, and it is a roll call vote.
Okay, John,
Aye.
Carson,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Allison.
I'll abstain.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Moving along, we've got the update on the meeting with Woody Creek from Matthew.
So I wrote some notes, so I'm just going to be reading a little bit more than my usual spontaneous style, so forgive me for that. So Kelly and I went last week to Woody Creek to discuss the proposed Woody Creek replacement project, and again, Reverend Wendy moderated. We had about 10 residents attend, which was more than the time before. So overall, there's extreme skepticism and distrust of APCHA. That's the general theme that was coming through from these residents who attended, both in terms of the pilot program and more generally the overall relationship with APCHA. Residents feel that APCHA has arbitrary and powerful control over them, and also that APCHA singles out Woody Creek for special attention. I explained that Woody Creek is subject to the same regulations as all owners in the APCHA inventory, and this was really great. Kelly shared her experience both as an APCHA buyer and seller, and how the process actually works from that point of view, and also gave some good input on the county's perspective. This distrust really seems to go back all the way to the beginning of how Woody Creek came under the APCHA umbrella. And there's also a perception that the residents' efforts to improve infrastructure have not been recognized by APCHA. Our residents do not trust APCHA as an honest broker in the buying and selling process, and assume that APCHA will devalue their property upon selling, denying them a fair price. Well, that denying them really the maximum resale price. That's what they actually mean. I offered to go to the Metro board meeting, and I explained that APCHA board meetings are open to the public and we welcome their input. I actually did go to the board meeting virtually on Monday, and again extended my concern that they view us so negatively, assured them that we do apply the regulations as consistently and fairly as we can, and offered to keep talking to the Metro board and to individual members and to other sessions as needed. Pause. Kelly, do you want to, is there anything you'd like to?
Yeah, I'll add a few
Please.
observations. So I think some of the things that I heard, and then I'll kind of ponder on some of my takeaways, is one that they would like to be able to individually know what the value of their property is at any time. And they recognize that the CPI changes and the time changes, and so that day to day, the value of their home changes, but they feel like any individual person should be able to have access to that formula to know what their property value is. Because they mistrust APCHA, so they have to ask APCHA what that is and are not sure the answer that they're getting is accurate. Something else I heard is that they have felt that APCHA staff has told buyers to underbid purchase prices in the sale. So when something is for sale in Woody Creek, that APCHA staff is telling buyers you should bid lower than the maximum value. I think what happens sometimes in Woody Creek is they don't get a lot of bidders, and so sometimes a lower bid will be the only bid. And so people feel mistrustful that they're not being represented well as a seller in APCHA. I didn't vet any of this with staff for accuracy. I'm just relaying what I heard, and my takeaways are from that. I think when Matthew said that Woody Creek doesn't feel like their investments or the Metro board, and their investments in infrastructure have been recognized. I think they don't feel that they've been recognized in their sales price, in the value of their homes. So it really comes down to sort of the money and investment that they've made over time into that infrastructure. I think there was probably more. I mean, I had a couple of, I think, big picture takeaways I'll just offer. One is that for Woody Creek, I think my feeling is that they feel like at the time that the county came in and helped them to purchase the property, that there were owners trying to raise the money to do that themselves, and the county condemned the land. And so they forwent that opportunity, which plays out very differently if you look at the history from then to now, for the county having bought it than if they had bought it themselves, because then they could have had it on the free market. So there's a little bit of that history, which is unclear to me, but that some long-term owners still really hold on to. And that also that they paid everything back. And so since they've paid all of the money back that was fronted on their behalf and with interest, why should they continue to be in under APCHA's thumb, essentially? And these are my summary takeaways, my words. And that it's, they don't have the same opportunity as some of the other mobile home parks who are RO, and therefore their price can reflect a bidding war and a market value that their homes will never be able to, their home values will never be able to reflect. so that there's a real inequity of the fact that they've paid everything off, yet they're still subject to these real restrictions, I think is, for me, one of the real underlying tenets of why it's been hard to establish trust. You know, there's been 2 of these meetings now. In my observation, the meeting we didn't talk about the pilot project hardly at all. Because there's not even, I think, a sense of willingness that there's a fair shake there, or that we want to make it a fair shake. And we did hear that, I think, from some of the residents who were like, hey, we just want this to be a fair deal. We know it needs to be a fair deal for you, but we want to make sure it's a fair deal for us. And then other residents, I think, just don't trust that it will be a fair deal at all.
And it's not just, can APCHA do it well? It's real questioning of, well, why are you doing this? We don't trust you. There must be a reason why you're doing it.
Yeah. And then I think one of my bigger picture takeaways for us that I've been maybe you all chew over it for a while, we can talk about it later, but is thinking about how, all of this came out of our discussions for seller standards, right? And having sort of a minimum standard that a buyer should be entitled to when they're buying into the inventory. That continues to be a very valuable conversation. I think, though, one of my takeaways is should we be thinking about mobile homes differently than we think about stick-built structures? Because mobile homes are an inherently depreciating asset. So somebody could be keeping their mobile home up to really good standard, and it's still going to demonstrate wear and tear. And are we making sure that, the expected wear and tear for what is a depreciating asset is fair? And is our application then of seller standards, which could devalue the home, fair in that type of application? Or should we just look at a mobile home as, unless it's not unless they haven't just destroyed it or, what's the word we were using?
Neglected.
Yeah, just total neglect. Should they just get their full market value because it's a depreciating asset anyway? So those are some of my takeaways from that whole conversation.
And Allison, I think that reflects what you heard at the meetings as well.
I guess one thing I'm confused about, though, is that this pilot program is just us enacting the system as is already, correct? APCHA always has the first right of refusal. Right. So to me, I don't quite understand the conversation on if we should do it. It is already what we do.
And there's something, and we don't really have a program right now to necessarily replace a unit. We could.
Right.
But we probably wouldn't unless we have a pilot program in there. So that's kind of what
Maybe
the
funding,
discussion.
yeah.
Right.
And then my one other thought, as I'm hearing this type of pushback, is that could the pilot program, instead of being one neighborhood, be these situations that we know are already in existence, like 16 Ajax. We actually have a situation which would be a perfect pilot, and perfect might be a very inaccurate word there, but these situations do come up, and that's why we've started talking about it. Could we pilot the places that have been neglected instead of a whole neighborhood?
Like a target of opportunity when something, right. And that's, I think, where staff was going on this. I certainly don't think there's enough trust in the community in Woody Creek to package it as a Woody Creek pilot program. And that doesn't mean to say, a year or two down the line, if we've got a better rapport with the community there, we might want to revisit it. But it is all, the regulations allow us to do something similar as needs arise, so maybe that would be a better way to look at it right now.
Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Carson. I just want to make a few comments on factual matters here. One, regarding the assertion that APCHA has somehow forced sales of units below maximum resale price. A couple months ago, an attorney representing one of the owners there made that allegation, and I asked for specific examples. I got a number of what were said to be specific examples of that. Cindy and I researched it, and it turned out to be untrue in every case. There have been sales below maximum resale price, but APCHA has always advertised the units for sale at maximum resale price, and any transaction that occurred below that.
This Carter really didn't eat it.
Pardon me?
No, go on.
Oh, any sales that occurred, the sales that occurred with a price below maximum resale price were negotiated between the buyer and the seller at arm's length, and APCHA didn't dictate the outcome. As far as APCHA being unfair to the HOA and the owners from the inception, the APCHA regulates the sales of the units at Woody Creek based solely on the deed restriction, because it's a unique deed restriction that was negotiated at the time that the subdivision was approved and the property sold to the owners. That the HOA was at all times represented by legal counsel. It was a long and tedious process, but the HOA and APCHA negotiated that deed restriction in good faith, and it says what it says. So there was no overreaching by APCHA during those negotiations that I'm aware of. Finally, the issue of the homes being depreciating assets, that's true for state and federal taxation purposes, but there's no disadvantage. That doesn't carry over to the way that the properties are treated by APCHA. APCHA does not depreciate the value of those units for resale. They're treated exactly like stick-built homes for purposes of APCHA's regulations and the resale of those units. That's it.
Thanks, Tom. And Tom's absolutely correct, and we were armed with those facts, but we were trying to listen and not to get in a discussion over those facts, although, you know, those are the facts. So we were trying very much to listen to the residents in that process. And we even, using Kelly's example and then me talking from the APCHA point of view, we tried to walk through the buying and selling process again, which we did. And I was like, well, you know, we can't guarantee anybody in the APCHA program maximum resale price. That's just not how it works. We need, I'm sure you can understand why we would need that option if there was a big problem, you know, not that we necessarily exercise that. And the residents disagreed. You know, they wanted, and I said, what would you want? And the answer was guaranteed maximum resale price, which, you know, there is just a fundamental blockage there on what they would want and what we can give them. So I think at this point, you know, I want to keep talking. I don't want to lose momentum with the Woody Creek community. I want to keep talking to them and try and build some trust. But I think in terms of it being a Woody Creek pilot program right now, I don't think it's the time for that. But as Allison was saying, we do have the power under the current regulations to look at similar situations when they come up as targets of opportunity, and we may have one or two popping up in the meantime. And it's not we're never going to do this, but I think under the current circumstances, it shouldn't be a Woody Creek pilot program, and we should keep talking to the community there, and we'll keep you guys updated when we have situations similar to this where we might want to do it, if that makes sense with you guys.
Real quick, Rachel, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Kelly and Matthew for being there and gathering this sort of feedback. It's really not surprising at the end of the day. You know, we'd often hear from Aspen Village when I was on the county side saying that, hey, we should have all been able to go free market. And if the county hadn't interfered, we would have all been free market. And you talk to people like Bill Toot, who's sadly passed away now, and he'd say, no, that would have been 10 free market lots and all the mobile homeowners would have been gone if the county hadn't been using its growth management powers there. So it's not surprising. But I just really was going to point out that, you know, it's not just the mobile homes that potentially have depreciated or, rather deteriorate in their quality. And it really strikes me that, you know, we talked about a Marthaton Nostal project coming up, which was a really much older home or series of some apartments that were converted as development mitigation. But I look at that much older building and think, you know, with a very limited number of units in it, how will they ever be able to afford to do the major rebuild on the roofing and siding and any number of other major systems there? So I think that there's more projects that may well be stick built. You've all heard about the issues at Hunter Creek, which was really cheaply built rental housing when it was conceived. And, you know, going towards capital reserves is, you know, half of what my monthly appreciation would be. And so that's similar to Woody Creek saying, hey, but we paid off our infrastructure improvements. Don't we get to add it onto our price? You know, I'd have to say, no, people across the whole system are paying into capital reserves to keep their basic infrastructure running or upgraded. And that doesn't get all added onto your price. That is the price of maintenance. But kind of the final thing is to come back around on this and to say, you know, it's a little interesting because all the people who currently own in Woody Creek and you know, throughout most of our system, they don't have the new contract with the larger seller standards issues in them. And so the fear of I'm not going to get my maximum resale is really just very limited to what the actual market will bear and what people want to pay for properties that are that old and perhaps that funky, as opposed to, you know, other things. But there's, you know, the seller's standards are in the new contracts, and the same, I guess, kind of minor authority that Cindy and the staff have now to be able to say, you will have to replace the carpet or you will have to do a few minor things is about all APCHA has at this point. Whether it's the Woody Creek homeowners or other homeowners who bought 10 years ago somewhere else in town. So, you know, in some ways that fear is overblown. It's really the new purchasers who would be coming in wherever in any of the APCHA properties that would be agreeing to and understanding the obligations of the seller standards going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Tom, did you have another comment? He's on mute. You're on mute.
Tom, you're on mute. We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Got it. Sorry. Sorry. Just for perspective, if I have it right, there are 4 mobile home parks in the city and the county: Smuggler, Aspen Village, Woody Creek, Lazy Glen. Every one of these parks were originally privately owned as single parcels with all the homes on a single parcel, and the improvements, the homes themselves, owned by the residents. That's the old-fashioned typical situation. The county, all of them were in the county at the time they were subdivided. The county approved subdivision of every one of these parks at densities below what zoning would otherwise allow, and thereby providing the opportunity for the owners to buy. The owners of the homes to buy individual lots, I should say. And each one of the deed restrictions for each of these parks, well, it is unique. They're all different. None of them are the same, because the issues surrounding acquisition of each of those parcels and the condition of infrastructure, et cetera, were all different. And each one of the deed restrictions, which is the basis for APCHA's regulations on sales and other things, were separately negotiated at the time that the parks were subdivided. So if you want to, you can't really understand why any of these parks, including Woody Creek, have the particular limitations that they have without going back through the history of that whole process, which took a long time. The outcome being ownership by the residents, subject to the requirements of the deed restriction that were negotiated. But to understand whether that any of those deed restrictions are fair or not, you gotta go back to the time that they were adopted and approved on both sides.
Matthew?
That's all I'm going to say.
On a more positive note, I thought having Allison and Francie and Kelly and me going out to meet with the community was great. I want to do it again. I want to go out on the road and meet some of the other people. I hope I can grab a few board members to support that and come out and meet it. Especially now we're in a I'm gonna say it, in a post-pandemic world. I'm sure we'll be in a pandemic world again, but we're in a post-pandemic world. It's something. Although it was really interesting, it was great. It was a little painful at times, but that's part of the fun. So I want to try and do it again and take it out on the road, and I'll be looking to some of you guys to support that.
I just kind of want to.
I would come with you, but I am
She's not
now
post-pandemic.
caught
She's not
in the
post-pandemic.
post-pandemic and home with COVID myself.
Sorry to hear that, Rachel. Okay.
I was just hoping to kind of understand that background situation a little better. Kelly, you're kind of describing it, so I'm not sure if you do know, but so it sounds like this parcel and these parcels being the four were privately held and then they were like rented. And so how did we get to the point where the county stepped in to help them buy it? Was the property owner just going to sell and it was either lose the home or raise the capital, or how did we end up here?
So I don't know how far we want to go down this rabbit hole, but Cindy has prepared a history summary, which I found to be super helpful.
I'd love to.
It was my intention to share that with everybody, but I didn't actually do that, so I will do that. So sorry about that.
No, that's cool.
But yes, generally a private owner, and this is, I have to say mobile home parks call Pitkin County or communities call Pitkin County all the time to figure out how can we replicate what you guys have done so that we don't lose all this affordable housing, because mobile home parks are generally held by an owner who rents space to individuals who own their mobile home unit on that space. And so if that underlying landowner decides to sell whatever there is not a lot of there's more protections now than ever, but there's not generally a lot of protections. So in different cases around the county, either through willing sales or through condemnation, have bought that and then resold it back to the mobile home owners, subdividing the properties so they own their unit and the underlying land. So no one else can, there's no option to come in and take them off their land.
Right, and
in the future.
So people, they kind of come in as a group, and so I think other APCHA owners, it's more of an individual decision, and I think that is a psychological part of it as well. It's a very different experience making the decision to come in and buy a home under the APCHA umbrella, as opposed to being kind of, some would say, pulled into it.
Well, it's a coerced choice by the situation,
it's a different experience.
Right, and I could see how, as you were saying, there's multiple funding options, where you go raise private capital or not, and each of those come with their own strings. And if you were on the losing team of that argument, and you've been telling yourself the story for 30 years that I could have had free market, I mean, I could see how we
So
get
real
here.
quick though, Tom said a comment. They were approved at higher densities than land use code would have allowed, right?
Right.
Yeah, higher density.
Higher
Yes,
density.
much higher.
More units
So
per
you get more
acre.
units per acre than,
Absolutely.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Which wouldn't have been.
They
okay.
were approved at way higher densities,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was to accommodate
The existing
owners,
condition.
the
Yeah, the
county
existing
did.
condition. Got it.
The county didn't have to do it. They had no right to the upzoning that allowed them to purchase the units. And so the quid pro quo was, okay, if we're gonna change to the zoning,
Right.
you guys gotta agree that these lots are gonna stay affordable.
Right. No, it makes sense.
That was the deal.
Okay. I'd love to see the written, but I think I got the gist. I guess the question that just, follows, and we want to be respectful of the feedback, and I think what you say makes sense, but kind of, stepping back, standards for sellers has been really important to us and to the community now, and especially going forward, because all of these structural deficiencies with capital reserves and upkeeps need to be solved, and in some cases they can only be solved at scale. And so this was intended as sort of the initial pilot. So I guess my concern is just like, I don't want us to hear this and say, okay, we're kind of done piloting and we're not moving forward.
No,
So
we're
how do
gonna-
we
we're
keep
gonna
the flywheel
keep-
going?
We're gonna keep the conversation going on seller standards. We'll enforce them when we need to. We'll let you guys know when that's happening, and we'll look for targets of opportunity to do something similar from the pilot program. And I'll keep talking to communities, especially to Woody Creek, and try and build that trust.
Yeah.
I mean, Matthew's not saying we don't wanna do this.
Right.
He's
Right, no,
saying
I know
We're
that.
gonna do this across the board when opportunity strikes. And so the idea is that we've got wherewithal, we've got some consensus that, yes, this is what we wanna do, right? So it could be the Ajax property, it could be,
So it's not going to be
Whatever.
just as things roll in. It's going to be when there's particular ones that roll in that are sort of ripe for confidence building, for
Right.
lack of a better
Yeah.
term.
Yeah.
Okay.
And and remember, we're not looking for any new powers or regulations or anything. This is all stuff we can do already, and it was just trying to package it for a
Yeah.
particular. So it's all stuff. It's nothing outside. It's nothing new or different that
Got
we
it.
can do.
And will you all, if you identify those opportunities, will you always come to us, or will they just kind
I
of
think
happen?
I think we will come to you, but we'll probably tell you what's going on rather than asking you for
Yeah, yeah.
permission. So we'll
We're
tell
gonna
you.
have to, because if we're
Actually,
gonna purchase
we're gonna
it,
do what Cindy
they're
said.
gonna have to approve the money
Yeah.
for us to
Right.
purchase it.
Right.
So no matter
Right.
what, we would have to come.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I just want to be mindful of, if we're like 6 or 9 months and we haven't done any of these yet, that we're aware of that, because that's probably not the rate of development we're looking for. Development of the program, not of any
Yeah.
physical structure. Okay. All right. Good listening.
Yeah, I just have, so I guess a statement or like a closing thought for me is, it's really helpful to go to these conversations, and like I just leave with a really high level of sympathy that I don't think is coming through in this round the table conversation. People are like, this is the biggest thing they own, and like the most important thing in their lives. Yeah. And these, like, as is with most of us, this is what is providing stability in people's lives. So, their mistrust and their worry, I think, is coming from a deep-seated place of like care and concern. And that just shines through in the emotion that comes up and the frustration that comes up, and with folks. And so I have like no judgment for any of the hard feelings and criticisms like wielded towards APCHA from people. Like it's their lived experience. Whether we can sort through it with facts or not is sometimes not like an option. And nonetheless, I still want to like hear and represent people the best we can, and sort of sort through the things that we can to make the program better, not just for them, but for anyone following behind them. Yeah. So that's sort of my my feeling on those conversations. And I think to that point, I'm just wondering, is it possible in Home Track, like, does it have a functionality, or could it have a functionality where any owner could go in
They
and figure
can.
out how much that they
Yes,
own at any one
can.
time? So we may just
They can do
also
that
want
right
to
now.
follow up with
We mentioned that in the
Woody
meeting, Kelly.
Creek, Creek, and just say, this is how you would do that.
Yeah.
Like, here's
Yeah.
the step-by-step
We'll work on
instructions.
sending them something in an email of how they can
Right.
access their value on any given day.
Okay. I think,
That's a great point.
that was asked by multiple people, and just like a real baseline, if,
Yeah.
misunderstand of like, why can't we know this? Why are you hiding this information that
It
is,
sounded like
we're
it was
entitled
deeper. They
to?
wanted to know how it was calculated.
Pardon?
It sounded like it was deeper. They wanted to know how
They
it was
wanted
actually
both, yeah.
calculated.
Yeah.
There was a comment, I want to know my price, but also the calculation, yeah. And we can do both.
I provided that as well to a lot of people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, Kelly. And I
Provided
appreciate
them
you.
copies of CPI reports, provided them copies of the whole formula, this way, and provided them with all the CPIs that we've gotten.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Matthew, I really appreciate pointing out the upside of just the face-to-face time, because it's a slow shift, but it's a really meaningful one, and so I think like you calling us forward into continuing to do that in other communities is a really good strategy, and I'm looking forward to it. I know everyone else is
Rachel?
too. It's cool.
Thank you. I'm a little nervous by this conversation, just in the sense I wouldn't want someone to look it up and say, oh, it says $225,000, and they go to list it, and then they're told you really have to replace the furnace because it's got a crack in the air exchanger, and you can't sell it without replacing the furnace. And then them coming back and saying, but look, I have this piece of paper that says it was worth $225,000 a year ago.
Yep.
And, whatever caveats go with that, whether it's negotiating over carpet have to be replaced or whatever, I just don't want to have created a false sense that this is now a guarantee, and that you've sent it out as a 100% guarantee, even if the roof is falling in, So not to go to extremes, but I think there needs to be some caution on how it is later interpreted and how it is mentioned when it goes forward.
We'll do that and make sure that is understood to be the maximum real sale price, not the value. I'm doing air quotes for people who can't see it. So that's not
Yeah.
that's
The maximum price they can ask for.
Right.
It's not a guaranteed price
Right.
that they're gonna get.
We'll make that very clear. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to presentation of the city's housing strategic plan from Diane.
Hi, good afternoon, Diane Foster, Assistant City Manager of City of Aspen and APCHA Gadfly.
APCHA fangirl.
APCHA fangirl. That's what it really is. So in your
Superhero
packet
shirts.
is the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan that the City Council of the City of Aspen just ratified a couple weeks ago. And the reason I wanted to bring it to you is because APCHA does feature prominently in here. And it is important to note, though, that there isn't anything in here that APCHA isn't already, that the board hasn't already directed staff to work on. The two things I just want to highlight for you, I will not be reading this to you tonight. Oh, I know, it's such good bedtime reading. Is if you go to page 17 in your packet, it's a page that looks like this. Oh, Nicole, thank you, that's awesome. It's a page that looks like this, and it's called Action Plan Decision Matrix. And part of the reason that I'm presenting to you all tonight is that you are people who, you talk to more people in the community than I do about affordable housing. And so it's helpful for you to kind of understand some of the guts of this. Couple more pages, probably. Oh, wait. Oh, that one's different, sorry.
We actually.
It's 17 in this, 22 in our packet. That's
Yeah.
all.
Okay.
Is this? We also have the slides that you sent, which is different. This is actually what we put in the packet?
In the packet, yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
send slides for
Okay,
this. Yep.
okay.
So what this is that staff went through initially and kind of ranked these based on things. This whole thing comes out of the City Council housing retreat that it was held in December 21. And along the top are some attributes such as quantity of affordable housing. Does it support the Aspen area community plan? What is the cost? Those are attributes. And then each of those on the next line are weighted. And it's highly subjective, but this version is one that the City Council updated themselves. And so it basically says, well, how much do each of these items matter to us? And then looking at each one of these 14 strategies, and these 14 strategies are not the only thing the city will do, right? If somebody comes up and says, hey, I'd like to do a reverse mortgage on my home and I want to give you a 50% discount, okay, we'll talk. So it doesn't preclude anything. What this does is these are the actions that are prioritized. And so I won't go through every one of the actions, but if you flip to the next page, it actually takes a subset of these actions, and this is where we actually asked the City Council to come up with a goal. And this is a compilation of input from different City Council members. And so looking at these are in order of the priority. And also, the order of priority does not indicate when it happens, right? Most of these are concurrent items. In fact, on each one of the action items in this plan, which I will cover a couple of these, it actually shows what the timeline is. It's just that if we have limited resources and a limited amount of time, where do you want our focus to be? What's most important? And frankly, if everything's important, then nothing is important. And I did not make that up. That is a long-time adage. What is interesting about how these numbers came up is that it was actually came up to 499. They gave me the courtesy of rounding to 500. And this is over the next 5 years. So 22 through 26, so where the clock has already started. And expiring deed restrictions, looking at replacing those. You know, when Cindy or Matthew or I talk to other communities and they say, well, what should we do if we're just getting started on affordable housing? You know, the two things I say to them is, one is go look and see if there are any deed restricted properties in your community with expiring deed restrictions. It's kind of an old school approach to things, and it was a way to entice developers. The other one I tell them is go look at way outside of town, something that you think is completely not even near your city, and go buy an old hotel there. Or motel preferably, because then they work as studio apartments. And something that this community has done in the past. So that's that target number.
Can I interrupt?
Please, yeah.
You are, some of the deed restrictions that are expiring across our inventory, the city is working on renegotiating that. What do you mean we're replacing those?
So there is not a specific strategy identified yet.
Okay.
And actually, this APCHA team is working on some of what could those strategies be, right? There's no one more of an expert in these deed restrictions than Cindy Christensen, and knowing, where are they? And we all know there are different deed restrictions, and so what do they look like? And then and then trying to evaluate what would it take? And preferably, are there incentives that can be something different than cash to get someone to replace their deed restriction? As you know, if someone's inheriting a property, that deed restriction will get updated. So that expiring deed restriction goes away. So there are incentives, and a lot of these expiring deed restrictions are in units that have been owned for a really long time, and folks who are getting a little bit older.
This is just ownership, or this is the rental, like Castle Ridge and?
Castle Ridge is taken care of. It's in
Okay.
perpetuity.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's just
No,
such a
we're
specific number. It
spec-
seems like we have identified which units we want to do
Yeah,
this with.
we're specifically looking at ownership.
Yeah.
Good question.
And Diane, this is Rachel. The other step that actually has already been taken is the new deed restriction, and the offer out there to people that, I'm sure it's just starting to break the surface, that you could reset your unit to its current appreciation roughly And if you get a new deed restriction and increase your ability to add capital repairs to it and things like that. So that has been an element that's already been put in place, hoping to attract some expiring deed restriction owners.
Good point. Great. If you look on the following pages, these action items, there are 14 of them, they are in the same order that you see them on the decision matrix. And I'll flip through a couple of them. And you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, let me see. The first one is, you'll see the APCHA logo. And so the first one is incentivize voluntary right sizing to recapture and utilize unused bedrooms in the existing inventory. That's something that APCHA is already working on. So, and this is City Council's way of saying, "Good job, APCHA board, keep going." And we get to take credit for it. The next one is APCHA compliance actions. And you'll notice in the, on the APCHA compliance actions, Matthew, Cindy, and especially Bethany, we kind of talked through what's reasonable in a 5-year period. We've only targeted 15 units. We'll probably exceed that, is what Bethany's estimation was, that we'll probably exceed that in a 5-year period. And it's always better to set a goal and exceed it. We think these are achievable goals. We don't think they're easy, particularly when you look at things like lumberyard. They're hard things, but every one of those 15 compliance actions is hard won, right? That it takes time and energy and focus, and a lot of people doing a lot of work, as you've seen some of the current ones happening. The next one is potential APCHA policy items to increase the number of available units. We wanted to recognize that there are things we haven't thought of yet, or that may not exist right now, that APCHA can do that may increase the number of units. And that's simply and there are a couple of examples within here of what those could be. And we didn't assign a specific number to that. And then the next page is APCHA policy actions to improve the sustainability of deed-restricted housing. And as you all know, that's what you just discussed for a while. And I heard clearly it is still a priority for this board. I think it's very interesting, and there's a regional housing coalition that's been starting to be stood up. We've got our first board meeting. It's now, that's official on June 10th, that we've got our first board meeting. And we've set some initial targets for what we want to work on. And thanks to Pitkin County, Kara Silbernagel and Ashley Pearl are facilitating that group. And one of the priorities of that group is housing sustainability. And why that's important for you to know is every week I go to these meetings and I feel like I'm among housing giants. There are really good, experienced housing brains in the room. And even just 2 weeks ago, we saw some things that I hadn't even seen before. An idea of a jurisdiction providing cash to buyers so they could compete as a cash buyer to buy a unit when they're going against short-term rental buyers. Just new and creative ideas. And as I mentioned earlier, the city council, it was very important to them that we made it clear that this list does not preclude other things, and also that this can be a living document. And I think those are all of the APCHA specific ones. With that, what questions do you have?
Any questions?
I've seen this a few times.
Have you?
And then some. Have you memorized it, though?
Not word for word. Concept for concept.
Cool. Well, thanks for the opportunity. And obviously, at any point, if you have feedback on this or thoughts or things you want to, please.
Shelley?
Yeah. Did this get adopted by resolution?
Yes.
You guys? Okay. What was the feedback you heard
From,
the public?
I'd put that to Skippy and Rachel. I think they're a better read on that.
We didn't really get feedback in the public meeting at all, I don't think. I'm sure each of us has had a number of conversations about all kinds of elements of this, but even in trying to solicit feedback about the whole plan, I got little.
Yeah, and
I have
mine-
to agree with that. There was no public comment that I recall. A few people in passing thanked us for doing that. Think our staff has thanked us for adding some clarity to direction and prioritization. But no, there's not been a lot of public feedback. As much as anything, the one thing we still kind of hear out there is coming, I'd say, more from critics of the program in general, who keep saying, well, how many units do you need overall? And we're able to say, these are how many units we hope to either secure permanently in the program or create as new units in this plan. But I can't tell how many units we're going to need given the free market values throughout the valley. And, someone was golfing with my husband the other day, and they said they had just moved to Newcastle, even though they're a worker in the city limits, and that their rent in Newcastle was less than the increase that was being asked for their old rent at their old place in the Salt. So I think what we're really seeing is the contraction of the free market availability to house any of our workforce.
And I will say, folks from Newcastle, Silt, and Rifle show up at these regional housing meetings. They all have affordable housing projects underway.
Yeah.
That's because it's not affordable in their communities anymore.
Yeah.
And Kelly, to your point, it's interesting. I hear, whether it be at Rotary or reading letters to the other, or whatever, it is very clear this community, affordable housing is among the top items, right? And I think the council priorities that were set a year ago are still quite valid, right? Housing, carbon, and childcare. I think part of the, one of my interpretations, and, it's just an interpretation, is this is kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And as Rachel pointed out, it's very helpful for staff to have clarity on where is it, council, that you want to go, right? And there's no lack of clarity that in this document.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just comment, and I think this is wonderful. I want my board to do similar work in terms of strategic thinking around housing. And I'm finding it more and more difficult to not acknowledge or try to answer some of the questions about, like who's in our housing. And I try to argue, hey, workers are parts of family, like workers in our community are also moms and dads, and, but we don't have any data to sort of show what that looks like or how to plan for that. And I'm feeling like it's a bit harder from the county side because we have such this slow growth, no growth kind of history, and this real tension with preserving open space and maintaining rural character, that we're getting a lot of pressure to answer those questions in more detail. That, I do agree, Rachel, they are coming from the critics, whereas we have a lot of support from other members of the community who know we just need to sort of provide housing at all levels along the full continuum. So I don't know. I'm wrestling with this because in order to get my board in a place of consensus, I think we're going to have to wrestle with it, and we're going to have to do the work of trying to answer some of this in a data-driven way. And I'm trying to think about and figure out how do we really get data to tell the picture and describe the need, I think, very accurately. And my hope is in a way that allows my board to reach a consensus to do more on housing, to pursue permanent revenue, or some revenue, maybe not permanent revenue, but on housing, knowing that like the need is more acute than ever. And I think the pressure is coming because it's so acute and because there's just this environment of scarcity that is creating this tension that I don't think has existed in the past.
Kelly, I mean, just to kind of respond slightly anecdotally from my experience, because I do have hundreds of conversations with people about housing, even if not about this plan, and I hear that skeptical voice, and I spend a lot of time with that skeptical voice because I think it's really important to engage people of different perspectives and, you know, like actually listen. And, you know, in my experience, there is a very small contingent who's just genuinely against housing on some ideological grounds or government assistance on some grounds, and so is trying to manipulate the situation to undermine the system. Very small minority. What I see a lot more of is people who genuinely have a community ethic, who understand the value of housing, but have some latent or acute distrust of government in general or specifically. You know, whether that's something that's actually happened to them here. I mean, we're hearing an example at Woody Creek, or just because they have the wrong news channel on.
Let me
every day.
just push up against that a little bit, though. Like, we have caucus master plans that say they do not want any more affordable housing in their master plan areas.
Mm-hmm.
We have a Pitkin County land use code that says affordable housing should be in the urban growth boundary only. You know, those are the constraints that we're operating under. So it's not just a few, I think critics. I think it is set into a bigger context of balancing these values, at least from the county perspective.
Yeah.
On that. And so for us to have, I think, a thoughtful and compelling plan to make the county a bigger player in housing, we are going to have to wrestle with that. So that's why I'm like sort of soliciting, like, what did you hear?
Well,
so we can anticipate, what we, in addition to all the things I think I know we need to answer, and that pushes up against some of, I think, what we do as an APCHA board, because it's easy to say we shouldn't build any more housing because APCHA is a corrupt agency. Why would we want to put more in that? And that's the, I think, most blunt, negative critique.
No, I appreciate that. And the reason I was raising that, and we face different constraints, right? Like, we certainly have, not in my backyard tendencies and other things, but it's not to the degree you're talking about. We don't face that. My point in bringing up what I've heard is that from those people that maybe present to most as vocally skeptical or anti, what I hear one-to-one and in groups is we really just want the justification. We'll actually get behind and support things with the justification, with the data, if we understand where we're going and why. But because of that latent distrust, we'd rather say not until. And I think they're getting wrapped up into that argument. And so I think your point about bringing more data, information, clarity to the fight, even if it's uncomfortable to suggest something that may be controversial, I think has tremendous value in the long run, and sort of I don't want to say winning that argument, but sort of settling the conversation in a way that works for the community. That was my point.
Kelly, just a couple other thoughts. One is, I'm glad you brought up the strategic thinking, right? City Council at their December retreat, it was 90% strategic thinking. And this is not a traditional strategic plan, right? If you could take a third of it and take out all the action stuff, and that would be the strategic plan. What we heard clearly from council was they wanted it to be action oriented. And we heard that in December, we heard that leading up to December, and we heard that in work sessions when we were drafting the plan. Second item, one of the things I think we're all up against, and we all meaning City of Aspen and Pitkin County, is I think we're coming to Pitkin County on next week in June, to talk to you about entrance to Aspen. And a team and me including me, went to Snowmass the other night. And one of the council members was just like, I'm sick of this. I don't even want to go into Aspen anymore. Why would anyone go there? And it does call that question of, if we don't continue to focus on affordable housing, I mean, make no mistake, this is the crown jewel of any, I mean, this is the envy of the West, this housing program that you all are on the board for. But the need to continue to invest in it is because our geography is not going to change, and we can make improvements in transportation, but we're not going to ever fix it in whatever people's ideal version of fixing it is. So if we continue to push workers, if we don't continue to be able to house workers in town, people are going to just say, right there, they're now our jobs down valley that compete with jobs here.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
And why would they want to?
Yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, I wanted to get a word in here and appreciate it. Right before this meeting started, I spent about 45 minutes on the phone with a person with 60 Minutes who was trying to work up a story to take to her, or a pitch to take to her producer about the affordable housing issues in large urban areas like Massachusetts, and how they're having such a challenge there with short-term rentals and Zoom employees moving to great places that they no longer can get plumbers, they no longer can get workers, and she was trying to frame a story around this. I had to say, hey, there's a big difference between short-term renters and long-term renters and, the whole housing program. But this is a national phenomenon. We just have to be clear on that. It doesn't matter if you're down in Denver, but the wages to housing situation is dire around the country, and it's only going to get worse with higher interest rates. But so I just kind of want to put that out there. The other thing is that this is a living document, and it will, as Diane has kind of alluded to, it doesn't necessarily include everything, and it also is not final. There will be other opportunities and other discussions. I really have a lot of respect for what Kelly is talking about in terms of the data that we need, or the information we need to quote, make the case if you were going to see the county pursue the type of resources that they really are going to need to finish out the Phillips Curve project, to assist with settling out on Centennial, to assist with a new construction, or should they want to buy in or anything with the lumber yard, things like that. But getting that data and making that case is going to be important. And there are some people who feel that we don't need bedrooms for children, and that if a worker wants to have a family and a child, they should move somewhere else, or that we really don't need to have our seniors be able to retire here. And if you want to work in a community and stay there once you hit 60, you should move somewhere else now, because this ain't going to be your town for that. And there are people who believe that, and who our housing program will never be satisfactory in their idea, unless it's just all rental and there is a control of a second-class citizenry who are not property owners. So I'm not interested in trying to satisfy those visions of a housing worker program. But we are having to get that sort of data and information, and talk about the fact that if you really want a professional to stick around in their 30s, who's gotten the training to be a mid-manager at a hotel or restaurant or whatever, they're going to want a place for a family, and they're going to want a place to eventually know is secure home, and that their money isn't disappearing into a rent pocket forever, and they're never developing equity. I mean, these things all work together, and there's no short-term fixes to it. But, I do have to say that there is some real frustration with all the burden of now recreating the whole Valley's free market housing inventory that's disappeared onto the back of Aspen only. And, half the people now crying for more housing were the same ones saying we don't need more housing when the Truscott addition was built, or fought against Burlingame annexation ever even coming into the city limits to have housing put on it. And, the city is starting to look at prioritization of our sales units, as I've brought publicly to this board and to my own counsel in other ways, because it's reaching a point where if there's not some sort of true reciprocity and inputs into the housing crisis, both the city and the county and everyone depends on that 2% sales tax that gets reallocated among all of us for our services, police and sheriff. And we're just not going to be earning that soon when our businesses start collapsing and closing and just not operating 5 days a week, because this is closing in on us. And I think it's going to close in faster than anyone thinks, given what's happened to the rest of the valley's housing. So I'd love to get a sense of it, but I think the number will be too large when you start telling people you have to reproduce the workforce housing that Aspen itself used to be before it all became second homes. It's an awful large number, and that is scary to a growth management controlled system. But I think you're going to find that neither Basalt nor Carbondale or those communities are going to want to allow a lot of growth just for an Aspen workforce. They're struggling with their own workforce issues in communities, and they're starting to prioritize any housing that comes from development from to just people who work within their municipal boundaries. And I hate to say it, but I think every action has the equal and opposite reaction, and the lack of participation is going to lead to the sort of prioritization, just mirroring what Snowmass Village already does. And then maybe there'll be a little push from businesses in the county to tell the county commissioners it's time to start getting in the housing game. And maybe there'll be a funding source question in 23, 24, 25 or something like that. But at this point, there's not. And I know Kelly's leading the charge. I feel really, I have a lot of empathy for being on a board that doesn't want to move on the crisis of the day. But this is a crisis, and we have to do what we can to work for our own communities at some level when there's not the reciprocity. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Rachel. No, I appreciate all that. And I think just as you guys are talking about, how you prioritize in a forward-thinking manner, our heads would be in the sand if we didn't feel that pressure from the community to do that. I mean, it's just the question of why don't we prioritize police and, hospital workers and teachers is, I never have a good answer for it. But I also think it butts up into that question of why are we utilizing what we already have in the best manner possible as well. And I know that my board wrestles with that. And I think we have, if I would like APCHA to help us wrestle with that, because I think that's what's going to matter in getting the BOCC, I think more enthusiastic. And they do see the problem, and I think they want to find solutions. I just don't think they want to, my feeling is that they don't want to find solutions at the expense of, the beautiful place and character that makes this a special place to be in the first place. So
Kelly,
thanks.
One last thought, I promise. Yeah. When you talked about wanting to put together something like this for the county, it's kind of one of those jokes that happens in every Western ski town that Aspen is part of the county. Yeah. And and I hadn't thought of this before. Is there, or could you consider doing some type of overlay on this and the county acting as an accelerant to this plan? And saying what in this plan could the county step in and really accelerate either with funding or staff or whatever it may be, and look at it as a potential partnership opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's
great question.
And I do think that would be probably how we would start. Just as fruit. Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Yep. Great. Hey, thank you all. I appreciate your attention.
Thanks. Okay. Look forward to seeing Rachel on 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
With or without the animals.
That's right. Okay, so we will move to first reading of resolution number 3, series of 2022, approving regulation changes. And looks like Bethany is here to give us a preview on this.
I'm actually going to jump in before Bethany kicks off. These are pretty straightforward, common sense resolutions, which I hope the board will swiftly approve. I particularly wanted to zero in on the third one, raising the rental exemption from 120 to 150%. If you recall back to the meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a gentleman and his wife who were in this very situation where they're in danger of making too much money and being asked to leave. Let me assure you, they are the first of many in this situation. We are at a situation where inflation is at a level that most of us have not seen in our adult lives. And this resolution is just an attempt to look at that for a year or so and just see where we are. We can revisit it at any time, but we really are in a situation right now which none of us have really been in for a very long time, and this was really testimony to Cindy and Bethany spotting this problem and wanting to just kind of get ahead of it before it became a problem for the community. I had a pretty long meeting this afternoon with John Peacock, who tells me that he has had a number of staff come to him and say they are in this predicament and it's going to happen. It's really starting to worry people, and we've also had some people from the city as well, let alone people outside the city and county. So you can look at this anytime you want, but this is just a situation to deal with it right now, to not have problems with people in the next year or so making too much money as wages start to catch up with the rate of inflation, as they've started doing in the city and the county, and it's going to be happening more and more. So thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to Bethany.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so as Matthew led in, actually how the memo's laid out, it's number 1, even though in the agenda it's number 3, just because we did it in order that they appear in the APCHA regs. So we started the conversation 2 weeks ago, which is allowing at point of requalification, maximum gross income to be at 150% or 50% how it's written, which means that they can requalify 150% higher than the category that they are in. Currently, it's at 120%. For those of you that weren't here 2 weeks ago at the board meeting, we did not see the income and asset numbers go up at all. They stayed the same. So we are actually still using 2020 numbers since they went down in 2021. We were able to still use the higher number of 2020. But what we're seeing is income and asset caps at 2020 levels, even though folks are, as you've seen in the papers, most of the big employers are handing out increases right now. So folks are having a hard time requalifying and being able to stay in. And so we are very much recommending that we look at this on a yearly basis, but that we move ahead with 150% requalification limit for their income. Happy to answer any questions and turn it over, Carson, to you to navigate the rest.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess I'll just ask, I mean, do we want to split these up? I mean, do we have to split these up into 3? Do we want to look at these? Do we want to discuss these one at a time? We want to go through them all and then discuss them? I mean,
Let's do them all.
just do them all? Yeah.
Okay.
I have
Then I'll
particular
keep-
issue with one, so I don't know what.
The next recommendation to change the regulations
Yeah, let's
is
go ahead and, real quick, Bethany, we'll just go ahead and walk through
just
all
jump
these
in.
and then, you
Okay,
know,
what's I guess, what is the restrictions on Part D for D and E, where we have bid submission, cannot bid for another unless the occupancy has changed. One owner can only qualify for an in-bid, an owner only qualifies for an in-bid if they have in-complex bid if they've lived there for 1 or more year, or they can't exchange unit for, same unit for same unit. I guess, what's the motivation there? Why is that a big problem?
So it's twofold. We have never allowed an in-complex bid from a single-family home to a single-family home. We have generally only allowed for, we've always allowed in-complex bids to have priority after 1 year. And what we talked about last time was the idea that folks are doing in-complex bids to get the better unit that's been kept up, and they've let their unit go through sort of 20 years of no repairs,
That's
no
not
improvement.
addressed here, though. I mean, you're
was
saying
that?
somebody bought the worst unit, they've lived in it for 6 months, and they want to buy the unit that just came on the market that's in their neighborhood better. They can't do that.
And we've always had a 12-month 12-month ban before you can get that in-complex priority. Cindy can talk to this a bit more, but the in-complex priority was put into place to maintain a neighborhood and allow folks to grow, but stay with their neighbors and the people they have come to know and consider kind of their tight-knit community. So it's always been a year. We are readdressing it and adding the kind of, if it's to address occupancy, because sometimes folks bid as a family of 4 on a 1-bedroom and win that, and then a 2-bedroom comes up, and that makes sense from the occupancy standpoint. I don't know if that answers your question, Cindy, if you want to add anything.
But that, I mean, to me, that doesn't, I'm reading the red text as new. Is that not true?
Some of it's new and it's been re-edited, so we have to keep it as red because it's been edited. And so this is how the regulations will be reflective. So yes, it's red. And the problem is it's because I've rewritten it, it has to be red because that will be a change in the regs.
So basically what it is that if you just want another 2-bedroom unit and you're already in a 2-bedroom unit, you cannot get the in-complex priority. Doesn't preclude you from not bidding on it, because you still can, but you wouldn't get the in-complex bid unless you had to address, you had a child and now you would want a 3-bedroom and there's a 3-bedroom that comes up. That is something that we would allow. But if your household hasn't changed and you're in a 2-bedroom, it's not that you can't bid on another 2-bedroom in that complex. It's just you're not going to get the in-complex priority. That's all that we're basically saying, is you're not going to get that in-complex priority. If you're in a 2-story one and you're older and you want a 1-story one and you say, this is why I'm going for this, that's another thing that's in here, that we would allow somebody an in-complex priority for that as well, because they have to readdress the type of unit that it is. Even though it might be a 2-bedroom, 2-bedroom, they are on 2 floors. Now they can't maneuver the 2 floors, so they're trying to get a 1 floor, but they still meet that minimum occupancy requirement of 2. So that's where that in-complex comes from on that. So it's not stopping somebody from bidding on another 2-bedroom unit. It's just they're not going to get that priority. That's the only thing, is they're just not going to get that in-complex priority.
So you're only getting the complex priority when it's, you can't swap like for like. It's only when you're actually doing something
To readdress your family household or whatever, going from
Right.
a 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom, then you would get a in-complex priority. If you wanted to, if now you're a single household and now I want to go down a bedroom, so then you would get an in-complex priority if you wanted to go from a 2 to a 1.
Allison?
I agree with John that I don't feel comfortable adding regulations that aren't addressing a problem. And so that particular part, I agree with the other 2 changes and most of the changes in the in-complex, but removing that, I don't understand what problem we're addressing. So even in the situation that Bethany just said, if you either got a worse unit to begin with or have let it go, and a unit comes up in your apartment building that you desire more, I don't understand why it would be a problem for you to get priority on that. If you really did let your house go, you neglected it, it's the same as always, like that asking price would be lower. And so I don't think people are purposely living in squalor in the hope that someday they pass that on to the next person and score, which is still a lottery, the next in complex. There are a lot of situations where the apartment buildings are built with, 1-bedroom units on the ground, Burlingame, or 1-bedroom units with a balcony. And so it's not your, I think there's other reasons people would want to do in complex bid, like for like, as you're calling it. We have subgrade. Half of our apartments where I live are subgrade. So, and it's all 1-bedrooms. But I do think for that reason of staying in your community and in your neighborhood, you still might want an apartment that has real windows. So I think I don't understand what problem we're trying to address, but I do think it's a negative impact to add that regulation. It's also in direct conflict with what we just saw. One of APCHA's directives from the city is on that. On one of these pages, it says to keep up in complex bids, and I think this is restricting in complex bids. So I would not support that one portion of this.
Rachel?
Yeah, I can understand this, but I do think there's other times when there is a problem. And, it has more to do with the pricing of the units as they come up. And, if a unit has been owned for a very long time by the same person, they tend to go on the market at a much lower price versus the ones that have flipped repeatedly. And maybe they were upgraded or whatever, but they get to be a much higher unit price. And so what this does is it also allows someone who has a much higher unit price, that's the one they won, they're so glad they won, they've moved in, but now someone else in the complex is selling and it's or passed away, and it's a much lower price unit, and suddenly they have a priority not for a unit that has better amenities or is on the right floor or something like that. They've gotten the in-complex priority to get the less expensive unit. And they're able to have a priority strictly for financial betterment. And the thing I really want to point out is there's an awful lot of people out there who haven't won lotteries who actually question the in-complex priority at all. Of why should there be an in-complex priority? You're giving people who already have won, who've already been able to stabilize their housing cost and their housing situation, more advantages than you're giving me as a worker who's worked here for 20 years and still hasn't won a lottery yet.
We don't know that people who have their names in haven't won before.
I'm just trying to say, I've heard from a lot of people out there who've always questioned the in-complex priority. And isn't that just APCHA residents taking care of APCHA residents and not taking care of the general need? So I do think that there are concerns with the people who already won a lottery, already got into a situation, now get the priority to be able to go after the unit that costs $50,000 less that other people would have loved to have had a chance to bid on. And so it's more than just did somebody let their unit run down. I think there's less of that example than the other. So I just wanted to put something out there as to why this could be quite valuable for the integrity of the program as well.
This just doesn't address that because we don't have a category where first priority in a lottery is someone who's never won. Just, anyone in a lottery could have won and be bidding from their APCHA house, including an APCHA house next door. So I just don't think that this addresses that particular concern. I also don't understand why it would be a bad thing for someone to have a lower priced home. I mean, I still don't understand the problem.
Well, again, I just don't understand why you would give someone a priority to get a better unit when it's not about readdressing occupancy. They already have a unit. Other people want to bid on a unit, but yet know the guys who already won and maybe they've been living there for 6 or 8 years. They got a really comfortable spot and they're going to get the priority over anyone else. I'm not suggesting anyone gets a automatic win in a lottery, but when you're not readdressing occupancy, why are you giving someone a priority over everyone else?
But you're not readdressing occupancy anyway because people win houses within APCHA who are already living within APCHA. That's already happening.
I mean, basically that's saying if you're in housing,
you don't get a bid.
You don't get a bid on anything else. Part of it is you got to write the rules for everybody, not just for specific issues. But in theory, that in-complex winner sells their unit to somebody that wasn't in complex, right? So you're still selling a unit. You're still creating a unit to sell at some point.
Kelly?
I mean, I would just say we're hearing from people they don't think it's fair, and I don't see how a private owner created any of the equity and the in-complex unit they want. They created none of that equity. So why are they entitled to any of that equity? Their equity is external. Their equity is in the common area. It's not in the internal unit. So that's where I feel like I'm just like, let's honor the unfairness that we're hearing from people, because there's nothing that person should be entitled to anyway.
Right. I mean, you're prioritizing somebody who already won. And I mean, Rachel, I think your comments, I mean, you said exactly what I was going to say. So I'm in agreement. I mean,
Well, wait a minute, though. I'm trying to understand this equity concept.
Yeah. I don't
okay,
understand.
so you've got somebody who's never won any APCHA property at all. And they come in and they see, all right, there's a property that's been remodeled that's coming up for bid. And I mean, I've watched it multiple times when I was bidding of, there's a specific unit coming up, and you go look at that unit because you're allowed to do that, and then in-complex bid period closes, in-complex takes that nice unit, okay? And then, so they move into that one, and then 45 days, 60 days down the road, you see the other one come up, and you go look at that other one, and it's in horrible shape, and it's not something that you want to move into. And so I guess what I'm saying is I think it is a fairness issue to say that, okay, the person who won the lottery, they automatically get that new unit. I mean, they get a priority. They get, first priority to move into.
Stated intent is
no, the intent
create
is
community in an association or
right.
property.
They're already in the association though.
But you want to keep them.
Well, and they settled for a subpar apartment in order to maybe someday do in complex. I think you're blaming the person who lives there without, I don't know how often this comes up, and I think that's why I'm asking, like, what is the problem? But again, like, you felt so lucky that you won something subgrade that you took it hoping that someday in your decades of work in Aspen you'd have something with real windows, and to be put back in, you're acting like the category of non-in-complex is only people who have never won, which it absolutely isn't, Right. So if that's what we want, we would have to create a new priority system where you only, like, once you've won, you don't get to be in that first round of any lottery. And I don't understand why,
this isn't saying you don't get to be in the lottery. You just don't get, you can still enter the lottery.
Priority.
You can still enter the lottery like everyone else. You just don't automatically get it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you don't automatically get it.
Right.
It's usually a lottery anyway. It's still usually
well, if there's more than one in complex bid, then yes.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. It just seems like we're trying to address, if that's an issue, that people who have never won get frustrated when someone who's already won once wins again. This is not addressing that fully.
Either you take the in-complex bid out, period, or I don't think you're addressing a problem.
And I don't know if I'd necessarily go that far, because there are times you want to readdress your occupancy.
I mean, because what I think you don't want to do, if you remove the in-complex completely, is the couple who moves into a one-bedroom and then has 2 kids and they want to move into a 3-bedroom and they do want to stay in their complex. I mean, I do think that is right, and that is the intent of the in-complex.
But how's that different than the person that took the unit, moved into a property, is single, took a subgrade, took ground floor, whatever, they'd like to move to the penthouse, so to speak, get windows and views maybe, and I want to do that. Well, how does that any different?
I think the difference, and I don't know exactly where I
that's
stand on this yet,
prioritizing.
but I think the difference is from the ability to make the argument to the community about the utility of that choice. The utility is maximizing bedrooms, not just user preference.
But it sounds like our argument is, no, but we don't like in-complex bids, you shouldn't get a priority.
I don't know what the argument is, but I think that's, if you're asking the question, I think that's the difference.
For me, it all hinges on occupancy. I mean, our whole program is built around occupancy. We give people a priority to address occupancy
Right.
in the bedrooms, either moving down or up. But we don't give a priority because I'd like a better view. That's the difference. You know, when a unit comes up and say there's not going to be any in complex bids, that means the general public has a chance for it. But when there is an in complex bid, that unit is taken away from the general public.
But in theory,
And it's
the
being
general
taken
public
away
is
Get a
from the
bid for the
general
next unit.
public, excuse me a second, it would be taken away from the general public ability to bid because the one in complex bid would get it first. And yes, another older unit might come up, but what you're saying is that we're going to give people priority in complexes for aesthetic purposes, for aesthetics, as opposed to occupancy. I mean, if we start taking this priority across the board about who wants a better view and who wants bigger windows, then we're no longer making occupancy one of our thresholds. And, you know, for the situation of the person in the subterranean complex, they can bid on any other project out there. They actually already have a unit. They can bid on every unit that comes up every year every month until they find something they like better. But the question is, do we give them a priority over everybody else when they're not addressing an occupancy question? And to me, that's just beyond the foundations of the program.
Sure, and just to kind of tease out that logic train, which I think is what, I don't want to put other policy in your mouth, but I think what Allison was getting at is if the goal is simply to focus on occupancy to the exclusion of everything else, then the solution would be to end in complex altogether and simply make the priority lottery for any lottery that changes the occupancy situation across the entire program, right? That would be the pure optimization of occupancy as the goal. And for the family that is in, say, you know, just because you're here at Benedict Commons, right? It's true that they may have to leave their area, but if they're getting priority in the whole system to get that extra bedroom, it probably actually increases their opportunity to find that new unit.
They don't get a priority to move to a bigger unit.
They don't, but I'm saying if
that
all we
complex they
cared
would.
about was occupancy,
Yeah.
the optimum solution to that would be to say, well, we're not doing in complex at all. We're simply giving the only priority lottery is if you are addressing the occupancy issue, system wide.
I mean, Rachel, you talk about quality of life within our apartments all the time, and so I think it's, I think it is fair to say a place where you could host your friends and family for a dinner party is a different home than, you know, the one that is smaller than that, even if they're both one bedrooms. And so I think you would at least want some sort of kind of grandfather where someone agreed to take something that wasn't an ideal place to make a home, knowing that there was that income, like, you know, once you're in, and it's just so scary to pass up winning that I think people have agreed to just to subpar living situations with this promise. And so I think that if we were to change something, you're sweeping the rug out of a lot of people's hopes and dreams. And I would wish that there was some way for us to address that. I also like even the situation of now you've had a kid, and so you get in complex bid priority for that maximizing the housing. We're acting like as if that family didn't. Why do we think that maybe they didn't let their unit run down and they're still giving a worse unit and taking a better one? I mean, we're like acting like if you had a kid, you probably maintained your house, but if you're just going from a 2-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, maybe you let it go sloppy. I think we're making up these anecdotes, and I still just don't understand. We're always opening up a unit, and so I think as long as we're always doing that, over regulating, not addressing something. I have not been convinced yet that we are regulating something that is causing problems in our system.
Besides the in-complex bid period, right? That's the complaint. It's not, I don't think people delve deep into, oh, they got the unit and I didn't because they were in complex. It's more about the in-complex bid period than it is about unit to unit.
No. What, having an in-complex bid period
Yeah,
for them to
giving
bid?
people, I think general public, you know, if somebody got an in-complex bid, they got priority over me, they won that. I don't think it's about because they took one bedroom to another one bedroom. It's because the complex bid got priority over me and I didn't get a unit.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Because when you're still on
the
the outside and you
complex
haven't
bid,
gotten
the
in,
complex
In
priority
theory, you're gonna
itself.
create another unit when it sells, right? When
Right,
one
that's right.
exchange.
and there's a difference between a realized problem and a perceived problem, but they're both real problems to, you know, the trust in the system, right? And having buy-in on any number of things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess living in Burlingame, you know, where there's a brand new phase being built and neighbors want to bid on the brand new phase, like.
They do not get an in-complex
I
priority.
know, but they
Yeah,
don't,
we've
I don't
made
feel like
that
they're
choice, but
entitled
they-
to it either. I don't think
Right.
that there's this assumption that they're entitled either to that.
Oh.
You know?
You haven't
So-
gotten some calls from.
I mean, I agree with that, but
So-
we're talking, I mean, in my theory, we're talking about a built complex,
Yeah.
right, that's been around for, I mean, however long, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And you're going from essentially one unit to the next, not going from, you know, what, 4 or 5-year-old built property to brand new.
It's almost if that first in-complex period, were that not to be publicly advertised, the gripes wouldn't be there, because in the end of the day, you still see a one-bedroom apartment that is up for a lottery that you get to put your name in, and the fact that it wasn't the first apartment you saw in that unit, it's the second, all of a sudden now you're frustrated. Like in the end of the day, there's a whole new apartment that anyone gets to put their name in and potentially win, and they're going to be so grateful for that.
Can I ask you this question, Allison? Because I understand that, you know, people will accept anything, right? And there's a sort of trail of breadcrumbs to the snack you actually wanted, you know, and so it makes maybe the choice of opting into a suboptimal housing thing easier. But like, do you think that if there wasn't in complex, you know, people you know or you would all of a sudden not bid on a bunch of suboptimal units?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen a studio in Centennial versus a one-bedroom.
I've seen all kinds of things.
But
I've bid
I
on.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Because I guess in my perspective, and I'm still in that place of like,
Number 2, I just saw that. I'm sorry.
oh, I don't even look because if they don't email me, I don't want to know. I was number 2. It makes no difference than 30, which is where I normally end up.
Well,
But 2
I was
sounds
number 2. You might
Great.
bump up. You never
All right, let's
know.
get that juju going.
Yeah.
Rates are going up.
You know, but I know what that 0 for 25 or whatever feels like, and I guess from my perspective, it's like, even if there wasn't in complex, I'm still gonna bid on everything because at least I could do that from a secure situation.
Right, and I think everything you bid on, you'll be grateful to bid on. You won't be resentful that it wasn't the other unit that was open in an apartment where you didn't live or own anything in there anyway.
Yeah.
So if we're fine with keeping it the way it is, if the majority of the board wants to go that way.
I think we should send it to
it's. I'm sorry, Kelly.
It's so hard.
Yeah, because, and you're right in a sense that there are people who've already bought and they thought, well, I'm in there now I know I have a chance for an in-complex priority in this, and you're right in the sense that it does pull this kind of out from under them. We do get a lot of calls from people who they said, well, they already have a unit, so now they still get to move into another unit. So people don't realize how many calls that we get from people on this stuff. So if the majority of the board feels that we shouldn't move forward with this, we won't move forward with this at this point in time.
Where is everyone on this? And
I think Kelly has something that.
Yeah. I think we should move this to second reading and have a hearing and, garner, I didn't have an opportunity to bring this to my board for their feedback and input and thoughts, but, I think that would be the best course of action. My preferred course of action. The public can weigh in. We can hear the different perspectives. If they choose to, and hopefully the press is going to cover this, particular issue in upcoming hearing, if the board agrees to have one.
Well, I think public hearing's great. This is a great conversation. Like, I think it's actually really awesome to be able to dig in, and we may or may not decide that it should be a 3-2 majority vote. Maybe it's something where we need some additional workshopping to bring people in. But my I guess request/question is, if we do bring it to a second reading, I think really agreeing on what problem we're trying to solve with this is important, because I've heard a few different problems that are interrelated brought up, and if we're only trying to solve for one of those, there's a more optimum solution for either of them. If we're trying to find the best hybrid answer, then maybe this is it, but it's not yet clear to me if we're all working on the same problem.
Yeah. Sorry to be from afar. I have a little variation on what, somewhere in between of what Skippy and Kelly were both talking about as a suggestion. I was thinking of tabling this at this point and trying to develop a little more background in history for the board to really take a look at, and for that matter, the public that would be potentially public commenting, rather than have the same conversation 2 weeks from now. And, I'll just say for the record, I am listening to Allison. I think that and John, I think there's, maybe there's not a reason to do this. I'd like to have more time to think about it, but, we need more real background. Maybe to the extent we can go back in our sales records over the past 3 or 4 years and say, how many times has the in-complex bid been used not to address occupancy, just to get a better unit? Or, let's get some real kind of case studies, names blanked out, or whatever. Don't want to embarrass anybody or drag anyone in unnecessarily. But how has it played out over the past 4 years? And is it more of an issue? I mean, I clearly think moving from a studio to a 1-bedroom is addressing occupancy.
I would agree.
Maybe others don't think of it that way. But I'd like to have more time to think about it and more research on it, rather than kick it to the next meeting and all of us be kind of pulling anecdotes and what ifs out of thin air. Thank you.
Yeah, John and then Kelly.
Well, I just have one last comment, and Allison kind of touched on it briefly, alluded to it. Some of this is how much of it is, the in-complex bid goes out. You go get to look at it as somebody that's not in complex. You get, wow, that's great. I can't wait to bid on it. In complex bidder wins it. All of a sudden, it's pulled from the process, and then 6 weeks later, a new unit comes on the market. How much of it is we create our own problem by just why don't we just do the in-complex bid? No in-complex bidders after 2 weeks. It goes out to the general public.
Because if they can't close, then we have to do the lottery and do everything all over again. That's one of the reasons why the first week, they have to have their bid in if they're interested in it. And then if they don't get it within that first week.
You don't need the because they can't close part. You can just, it doesn't close in a couple of weeks. You haven't listed it with the public. The public doesn't know there's no lottery.
That's not transparent.
Then we would get in trouble if we didn't.
Well, I know, I get the transparency part.
But it's a fair point, right, about like the perception.
We're kind of poking ourselves in the eye, or somebody's poking somebody in the eye.
We're saying something's available that's not really available yet,
Right.
Well, I think it's very clearly says in complex bid period this date, general public bid date this date. Like, it is very clear.
So the people who you're hearing from didn't want to read that part,
Yeah, but there's a difference between, we think there's an actual tangible problem, or there's something wrong with someone moving from unit type X to unit type XA, right? Versus there's a problem with the perception that this is unfair.
Yes.
Right? There's a difference.
Yes.
Yeah. And it could be both or neither, but they're different.
Yeah, that's why I'd like a little bit of case history going backwards
Bring it back
over
in a
3
year.
years.
Well,
Honestly,
So
it'll take
we
us
have
that long to
some
go through
idea.
and do the work, so we'll bring it back in a year.
I mean, I support part 4.
I support everything
Let's
but
do
that
that.
sentence.
Can I just say on the in-complex, I mean, I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of the in-complex bid stuff anyway, and I continue to think that in-complex bids should only be available to neighborhoods with healthy HOAs, which we have not, tackled additionally, and, healthy capital reserve fund balances.
Well, I'm assuming.
They have to be in good standing with their HOA.
Yeah, that's what
I'm just saying the
I'm
HOA
assuming.
itself
Yeah.
should, they need to be in good standing and have a healthy reserve, because otherwise what is the point of, if there's not, if the community is not healthy in that regard, like what does it matter if somebody moves in or across that?
Just to add a little bit more murkiness to the conversation, but if it helps in preparing for whatever we're going to do next, we have this concurrent goal around standards for sellers, getting new deed restrictions that are under that, and rehabbing previously uncared units. So fairness question aside, is it the case that somebody moving from a crappier unit to a better unit is a net negative for the community, or is that an opportunity to bring that up to standard with a new deed restriction, right? Like, I don't, it's just another layer to that onion.
So
We live in onions.
I've got yet a third suggestion here for this. So, yeah, right, as if we needed another one.
That's good.
So I know that there are a number of complexes, well, Castle Ridge being primary one, that turns over July 1st. And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, if we are going to, if everybody is agreeable, or the majority is agreeable, which it sounds like they are on the 120 to 150 range, I guess what I'm sort of thinking is maybe we separate them, we move everything but the in complex bids to second reading, and then we can take this and get more history, and then do a first reading next time if it's warranted. But I'm just thinking, I'm sure there are people at Castle Ridge that,
Because we can move part of this at second reading.
that are going to get.
You can pull it, you can adjust this and pull a couple of this and still move forward a couple of the items.
I mean, it feels
Just
like
the
they should be
second reading,
separate
public
anyway,
hearing.
like part 4, vote on, yes, absolutely, 100%, right? And I think but the other stuff, it should be separate. It should be 3 resolutions, essentially.
Well, we can do 2, because if everybody's agreeable on the other 2,
Well, and
unless we want to separate them.
I support the in-complex priority changes to the standalone home.
That's already.
That's already in there.
already
Okay,
have
and
that.
the
Yeah,
in-complex
but this-
bid, I knew the year was already there. Okay, so, and I like that you would, I guess, get the exception for mobility reasons, though I don't want that rule to be in place for you to have to accept anyway. So, I do support enough of this that I think we should move forward with some sort of version of some of these regulation changes.
Fine with separating them out. My question is, Cindy was kind of offhand saying it could take a year to do this research. I think this conversation is important now. I don't want to give Cindy a year's worth of work. I don't think that's what we're asking for or is what's required. So if we are going to split this up, I'd like to kind of scope out what are we actually asking for and how can we have the conversation in a reasonable time frame.
Well, I also think if we don't change this particular rule within a year, it won't have a major effect on the system. I think that's actually an okay timeline, but I guess it's because of that problem identifying question. So.
Yeah, and it depends how it relates to the occupancy question, because if we make choices that enable better occupancy flow, then it could have a significant effect soon.
Yeah, I think the point about I think the point about should there be in complex bids at all, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think if we're looking at addressing this, I think that's.
Either you take it out altogether,
You take it out altogether, maybe.
or you don't change the rules, as far as I'm concerned.
Rachel?
Guys, I just want to say that with 70 plus units going to go on sale at Burlingame 3, either this winter or, early January, whatever, depending on supply chain issues, there's going to be a lot of people bidding and moving out of existing complexes that will open up the issue of in-complex bids in those places that they're leaving. So while this may seem a little preemptive now, or why do we have to go through it now, the fact is that whenever you put a huge tranche of units online, like 79, there's going to be people leaving 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, and then resales within those complexes, and the whole question of in-complex priority is going to come back up again. I cannot go to eliminate all in-complex priority. That there's a really good foundations for why we have that. As I said earlier, I think Allison is making some good points about maybe we don't have to worry about 2-bedroom going to a 2-bedroom. I do worry a little about how long it keeps a unit off the market if people just keep trading units across the board and you're not really getting a brand new family in until 6 months later or something like that because of the listing, resale, move, mortgage, listing, move, resale,
6
mortgage.
weeks, most.
You know, at some levels, you might be
It's not 6
creating
months.
vacancies for a long time of the one initial unit. But,
Maybe you can
you know,
advise
I can't see getting rid of the in-complex bid already. That would really be wiping everything out. But we are going to see a lot of that movement come up this winter.
Well, that means people who have already won are gonna win new apartments, brand new apartments, which is exactly what we just heard people are complaining about, and we're inherently saying it's about to happen. So,
But they don't
again,
They
we're
don't
not,
automatically get them.
They won't automatically
but you
because
still don't automatically get them in in-complex.
an in-complex
Allison,
priority.
I think that's a bunch of assumptions again already because of the category mix.
No,
We're going to be looking at much lower
The
category
assumption that
mixes.
you just made,
So
that
you're
people
not
will be
going to be
moving out of
seeing a
their
lot of
place,
people from category 4s and 5s and ROs
then it won't be
moving
an
down.
issue. Yeah.
You can. So let me just, so we can move this along. We will
Well,
pull the in-complex priority
Real
information.
quick, I just have a question for Cindy and Bethany. So, I mean, just your gut opinion. I mean, how many of these do we see a year?
With in-complex bids?
So in complex, 2-bedroom to 2-bedroom,
Like to
1-to-1, like to like. I mean, and it could just, I mean, right, I mean, I'm not asking for perfection, I'm just directionally
It
correct.
just, it seems like lately there's been quite a few. Again, we can, what I can suggest is that we pull this and we bring this back to you in July. Give us a month. We're short-staffed, really short-staffed. We have people going on vacation. It's a little crazy in our office right now. So it's a possibility we can get some of that information sooner than that. So
I mean, is it 5, is it 20?
it's not, well, we haven't had 20 lotteries, so it's not 20. It just seems like lately it's just been, it's just been that way.
That's easier to figure out than.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an easier to figure out
Thank
than, you know, some of the other asks, so
Well,
we can look this year.
so we've kind of got, I think we've got 3 options. Move it forward, just move it to second reading, and we can
See if we can get you the information.
see if we can get the information. If not, we
okay.
can
We don't have to do that.
have the discussion then. We can separate it out now, move forward everything else. And then Rachel, I think you had said just table it. So I think
Yeah.
we've had enough discussion, and
I'd bring
somebody'd
it
like
back
to make
in
a motion.
month.
Well,
I
I would
can't.
move on part 4, maintaining eligibility and compliance, our motion, and grievance policies, and making the change accordingly to 50% versus the 20%. I'm not sure I understand the second, or E either, so I'm not on board with that one.
On the last page?
Yeah.
What it is that if somebody who, we have had a few people who once they close, they start immediately bidding again. And we actually had somebody who won. Right the first day they closed.
That's
They-
another, like, one, it's a lottery.
It is, and you're absolutely right, it is a lottery. It's just the perception out there was.
But it's another thing what Allison's talking about, like, I got a place, I got my housing, but I still don't like this place, but I'm gonna take it. And it could be as simple as, you know, I use.
More
an
money
example.
for us because both 2 units come up.
Yeah.
that isn't our intent. Our intent is, and I think that that's one of the reasons why we put this forward, is that it gives that person time to say, well, maybe to even think if he might even like that place there. At moving in, just closing and moving in, and then all of a sudden moving to another place, I don't think you really know if it's the best place for you or not, because you've never had a chance.
It's just a cooling off period.
But,
but
again, it's perception out there.
I mean, I guess what I'm just thinking through that. I mean, so I lived in a free market affordable housing place for 7 years, and right. I mean, I could see a scenario where something happens, the property goes for sale, and I'm desperate. I mean, I can't find anything in town. I can't find anything in Basalt. You know, throw up a Hail Mary on something that's, 1 bedroom and I win it. And then, my choice is either take that or quit my job and move out of the valley. I could be in a position where then, I've got 3 kids in a
Well,
1
that's
bedroom.
different.
Right?
If you have to
Okay.
readdress occupancy,
So then that wouldn't count.
that what
Okay.
we're saying
So if
is
somebody
that,
took a smaller place, then, but it wouldn't be.
But-
Well, I
but
mean,
it-
it's basically, that's basically the same
Yeah.
argument as the end complex,
well,
but it's
but this
just
this
not.
just puts them in the lottery, is what it does,
Okay.
and it doesn't give them a
But it doesn't allow
priority
them to
do
be
that.
in the lottery
It's-
until later.
And
for a
you're
year,
right.
right?
On that, it
I
would,
mean, we're
a lot they
talking
couldn't.
lottery, right? If somebody wins, they win.
It could take somebody
Could
5
be,
years
hey,
to
I
win.
took Carson, I won in
And
Snowmass.
Preston moved
I'm
up
living
that
in
many
Snowmass Village, but I would
deposits
have
to
preferred to be in Aspen, because I work in Aspen.
Moving's the worst.
Down
Well, I'm
payments.
just saying, and then I win in
Put down 2
Aspen.
down payments in a year.
That's a
Good for
change.
you.
Same unit, if I win a 3-bedroom, I win a 3-bedroom, I just don't see,
Bethany, this one's not redlined. What changed about
it's
it?
an addition.
It was an addition.
So, Allison, this is kind of a weird one, and I can work on doing this better. Often when we cut and paste out of the track changes document, which is what we work on for draft regulations, it shows up at red line. If it's a brand new typed
okay.
in item, it showed up as black. And so I can work on consistency next time. That's my fault and my apologies.
So this didn't
this-
exist before.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't think I finished a motion, but I'm not really sure with E, but I do support the income change. Maybe I'll pull back my motion, and I motion
Part 6.
Part 6, maintaining eligibility, compliance, and grievance policy, paragraph A. Moving that forward.
Okay.
And then the rest of it, I would pull back on.
Is there a second?
Is that official enough? Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, so are we, so we
Should
have,
the attorney write it.
we have a motion to move forward, Part 6.
The fine schedule updates, did you want to include that in there?
Yes, I think, yeah. Amended to add the fine schedule updates as attached.
We don't want E?
Are you okay with that as well, Allison?
Sure. Sure, yep.
He's pulled 5.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
5 and E on the following page.
5 and E.
Which I would support,
under-
actually. Yeah.
5.
You want me to call a roll call?
Yeah, so let's.
Well, isn't there discussion on the motion?
Yeah, you got a second now, there should be
Okay.
discussion.
Okay, so Rachel,
Yeah, I would really just want to suggest that in the future, when we're looking at guideline changes, they come back as individual resolutions so that we can move forward the ones we want and take off the ones we don't want. I don't think the motion included any direction to what's happening to the things that we're taking off. Are we asking for additional staff work at some point in time? Are those ideas totally discarded now? But having the 3 or 4 together makes it challenging. And I just didn't even, we really didn't have a discussion about E. And now E is not being moved forward, and that's probably fine with me. But it's just not a very clean process. And when this comes back, I would much rather vote on them as individual policy changes for their first reading, their movement on second, I mean, don't we need a motion to read on first reading and then a second reading or something like that?
This is first,
and then
this
move it,
is first
approve it?
reading.
But it just is a very awkward way to look at multiple topics that have differing board opinions. And we might want to vote yes on some of these and no on others of these, but we can't because it's just one motion.
Thank you for that input, Rachel. Thank you. We'll keep an eye on that.
Any other
Thank you.
discussion on part 6?
Well, I would just say the real importance to me is getting the housing or getting the income thing addressed as soon as possible.
Agreed.
That's the only thing.
Allison,
I
go
really appreciated that Kelly said that she'd want to bring the parts we're pulling to her board. So I hope that as representatives, the county commissioners and the city council, when you do your reports, do at least float this so that that's kind of been vetted ahead of us discussing that again. Thank you.
Kelly.
This is tangential, but it is I think it's a regulatory issue that I just want to flag. I'm concerned that people are moving out of units, that we don't have people to move into units because of their qualifications. And I'm wondering if there is an opportunity to let people go month to month or something until we have a body to move in. Because I'm getting calls like, why did this person get kicked out and now that unit's sitting empty? And I think this is probably, I'm assuming this has to do with the LIHTC.
I'm sure it does. And there's,
units.
and we're stuck. People don't understand.
Well,
it,
and
but
I don't
we're
understand
stuck.
which is, because I know part of it was, these were our regulations to help make that a better, so I don't know if this is something else that we could consider.
No, this helps LIHTC as well. It doesn't for the initial
Sure.
lease up, but it helps for somebody who's already, because some of the people who have reached this 120, because in LIHTC, once you've been in there for a year, you could win the $1 million lottery and stay in that
Sure.
unit. That's something, so the maximum incomes is something that we put into place.
I just also wonder
But-
if it makes sense to roll those to a month to month until somebody qualifies to get into that unit.
Kelly,
can't.
to ask specifically about a situation that was brought up, I think, by the individual who provided public comment last meeting. And they had spoken of someone that got, had to put stuff in storage. And when a lease ends at in a LIHTC unit, if we transfer them to month, we have to fully requalify them before they can even adjust to that month to month. And oftentimes they say, no way, I don't want to redo it for just a 1 month period. But if they choose to completely requalify, that, is something we can look at. Most people don't, because it's a pain to actually do the requalification with LIHTC. But
Is that something to put in the initial lease though, then, where they're qualifying that, it will roll over to a month to month? Until that
Chapter
unit
rules
is
still
filled with a, qualifying
Chapter rules
person?
require that we have
Part
to
of it, you're
requalify
protecting
every
the
year.
tax credit. You're protecting that capital stack.
I know, but we have
For-
literal empty units and people who've been kicked out.
Regulations
So,
somewhere
it's,
way up here need to change.
and I'm happy to take that on. So that's why I wanted to sort of, 'cause that's a question I have. So if there's not a possible path, that's helpful to know. But
No matter what,
if
they
there is a
have to
possible path,
requalify.
I'd urge us to find it.
Yeah.
And then my second, what was my other relevant question? I'm wondering if this board would consider, my understanding is in our lease rental process that people are on the hook, like if they break a lease, they're on the hook to pay the remainder of their lease unless that unit gets filled.
If they break their lease,
Mm-hmm.
we have every right to have them abide by the lease. We do
Sure.
not do that. We do it for 1 month for tax
Mm-hmm.
credit. We don't go any further than that because we know we're having a hard time filling it. It's not them.
Mm-hmm.
So we do charge them for up to 1 additional month, but we don't go any further than that 1 additional month.
Okay.
If
And
they've
how does
broken
that
their
look
lease.
for other units, for the
But
other
again,
leases?
other units we fill.
Okay.
I mean, and unless they left the unit in such disarray that the security deposit isn't even gonna cover what we have to do with that unit, and then we lose additional rent because it was in such bad shape.
Release was
So, yeah, and more than likely, we're not gonna get any money from them anyway, so they're just gonna be put on our ineligibility list because they're gonna owe us money.
Tom,
In a
did you have
situation
something
like
on
that.
this?
Well, can I just finish my thought? Because the consideration I guess I would want us to discuss is perhaps waiving that for category 1 and 2 tenants. So these are the lower income, 80% AMI and below, for them to have to carry whatever additional duration of their lease.
Again, if it's over a month, we don't charge, if they've been in their unit, they signed a 12-month lease, they left after the first month, we charge them an additional month. We don't charge them 11 months. We try to fill it as fast as we possibly can. The tax credit ones, we can't. So they do sit empty, but we're not charging that person more than that one additional month is what we're charging. Yeah, that's driving me crazy. And they usually have paid they usually have like last month's rent, which it covered their last month's rent, so they might have to come up with 1 month. But that also helps them. My concern is by not having that, all of a sudden, we're just gonna have somebody leave in the middle of their lease and because they know, I'm not gonna have to, I don't have to abide by this lease.
Yeah, no, I get
And,
that.
yeah.
And that's why I was thinking only for the real
Well, and I don't know
lowest
if
income.
Tom could weigh in on that, but I don't know if somebody would think that we're not being fair to everybody else by only not doing it for category 1 and 2 people.
I get that, but as policymakers, we also get to sort of determine, like, from the society side of things, the need to sort of carry on that cost is a bigger burden for people at the lower income scale than higher. I'm throwing that out
The
there.
only place that we would have any say in on that, just to let you know, is the properties that we manage, and they're mostly owned by the city. So I would think that would be also something that the city would want to weigh on.
Sure, I
Weigh in on
recognize
as
there's a
well.
budgetary
Yeah.
impact to that.
Tom? He's on mute.
Yeah. Tom, you're on mute.
Ordinarily, unless the lease says otherwise, I don't think our leases do. When a lease expires, if you let the tenant stay, it automatically converts to a month-to-month lease on the same terms and conditions as the written lease. So you don't have to write up a month-to-month lease when a lease expires if you want to let somebody stay on a month-to-month basis.
Thank you, Tom.
Meaning you wouldn't have to requalify them or any of that if you don't want to.
Light
Unless
Tech is
they run
different.
into-
I'm just saying,
Right.
Light Tech, we
the
have
CHAPA
to.
requirements.
Annually.
you gotta,
What?
you gotta
Light Tech, we
requalify.
have to. For ACI and T2, CHAPA requires it. We have to
Well, if you
requalify them
have-
every year.
if it's a project subject to CHAPA's rules, then that's different.
Yes.
But if it's a project that is not subject to the low-income housing tax credit program or Section 8, then what I said is accurate.
Yeah.
Hey,
All right,
can
well, I'm on a
somebody
mission.
repeat the motion on the table?
You have John's motion on the table to, I think it was
Yeah.
only to approve certain provisions going to second reading.
So my motion, Rachel, and it was, I motion to move part 6 forward, maintaining eligibility and compliance and grievance policies, paragraph A, where we deal with the 50% adjustment from 20%. But to drop parts D, or part 5D and part 5E, but then also to move forward with the fine schedule update.
Can I make a suggestion, John?
That'd be fantastic.
Why don't you just move for approval of the ones you want to approve,
That's what he's doing.
and then, but not address the ones you don't want to move forward, because I think there's some disagreement about how those should be dealt with. So, if you just move to approve certain ones, then there can be a separate motion on how you deal with the others.
Do I need to withdraw the previous motion, or are we just amending and clarifying?
You can amend your motion.
I'm fine
If
with
you
that.
want.
I would like to amend my motion to move forward with Part 6, maintaining eligibility, compliance, and grievance policies, paragraph A, and number 3, dealing with the fine schedule update.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay, so any discussion on this? Any further discussion?
And then separately,
Need a
we'll decide
second.
how to bring those ones back.
Allison
Allison
seconded.
seconded.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, it's a roll call vote.
John,
Aye.
Rachel,
Yes,
Carson,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes. Yes.
and Allison.
Yes.
And then as it pertains to these other issues, I thought I heard that we all wanted to continue to talk about it, and it'll come back to us in a month or something. You said July.
Well, so I think we can either move it forward to second reading, or we can table it.
I would make a motion to table for further research and exploration the items related to in-complex priority that is not addressing occupancy, and the item E, bid submissions.
I'll second.
Any discussion on this motion?
I just want clarity. What timeline are we talking about?
Skippy, I'm unwilling to put a time frame of 1 month or more or less. I'd like APCHA staff to have a chance to take a look at it and pop it into their work plan, knowing their vacation schedules and other workload. I agree with others that have said that I'm not sure this is the most critical item right now, so I don't want to put a 30-day on it. But it, as I said earlier, I think it will become more in play as we start putting more for sale units online in this fall.
Rachel,
So
you
I
can't-
don't want it to disappear forever. This was not a motion to, postpone indefinitely or table permanently, but I'm not sure it actually needs a date certain in the motion.
Yeah, Rachel, you can't see me because you're not in the room, but I wasn't asking for us to prescribe a date. I was looking over at staff for a timeline, because at one point it was said that it might be a year, and then we said it wouldn't be, and so I'm just kind of trying to get a feel.
We'll address it promptly,
Okay.
but perhaps not expeditiously.
Okay.
Next meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
Don't expect it in the next meeting.
No, don't expect it.
Okay, so we have a motion to table Part 5, D and E.
And I seconded it.
In a
And
second.
we have a second. Any discussion? Not, we'll roll call vote.
Allison,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes,
John.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, we will move to Board of Directors comments, and we'll start with Rachel.
thank you. I have nothing this evening.
Thank you, Rachel. Allison?
I don't think I've met you yet, Nicole, so hello. Thanks for being here. And I'm sorry for the last couple meetings I've missed, including, I don't know if the survey went out about
It
the right
did.
sizing. So,
Check your spam.
Got it.
okay,
It
so
was in my spam.
if you have an email registered with
I like
Home Track,
spam.
it would have gone to you, but if you haven't signed up for Home Track, it wouldn't have.
No, even when
No.
we do approvals in Home Track, perhaps some of them go to spam and junk. So there's really nothing that we can do with how some people have theirs set up.
Great.
It just,
Does it come from APCHA? Who's the sender, do you know?
I believe Maddie actually sent out the email.
Oh, great.
Because there's so many of them, we have to do them
Right.
in batches.
Okay,
I got mine.
I think it's.
Yay!
Appalachia.
okay. Is it too late to?
No.
take it?
Oh,
Okay.
do that.
Excellent. I'm glad that went out. The one other question I had about, to me, about these LIHTC units is there any way to qualify them bedroom by bedroom instead of as 2-bedroom? They have to be known as one unit?
You have to, how it came into the system, you have to look at it as a 2-person household. There's a maximum for a 2-person
Okay.
household. Those are the ones, honestly, the studios and 1-bedrooms we fill.
Yeah.
It's the 2 bedrooms that we're having issues
Right.
with.
And I keep hearing like 2 roommates want to move in and they're,
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's frustrating for us, I can't tell
oh
you.
gosh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes, that, I didn't know the answer to that when it came to me from a member of the business community. I think that is all my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Kelly?
I peppered my comments in throughout the meeting, I think, so. But I would like to say, I would like to try and facilitate a conversation with LIHTC if I could take that on
I'll write that down.
and write you and Matthew
Yeah.
and Cindy into that, because I'm on a mission and we're gonna get these bedrooms filled by like June 15th.
Divina might know who we can talk to on that.
I'll figure out who it is, who is a good contact as well. Thanks.
No comments. What?
John?
You know, I've
That
updated
shirt
you
says it
guys.
all, Skippy.
Yeah, I wasn't going to comment on the shirt, but I had some.
On
like
camera,
it.
Cindy and I look the same, I've noticed.
I've updated you guys a lot on this, but in my other board life, fire department, July 1st is our targeted date for firefighters and other people to move in. I think we have
Nice.
a police officer and family moving into one of our units as well.
Awesome.
That's exciting. I'm really pleased with how the construction went. Actually, to say that we stayed in budget in these times is amazing, and I think we'll have contingency, a significant amount of contingency left over, with which hopefully we can go find more housing for our department. So
Amazing.
it's a
Will
good
there be
deal.
a ribbon cutting?
It's a good question. We should probably do that. We did
Or
a
a
couple open
dedication of
houses. I don't know if
sorts.
we did anything. That's a good question. This is beyond me, but that's a good idea. So we may do that now.
Congratulations.
Thanks,
That's it.
John. And I don't have any comments. Maybe just a shout out if Rachel's on 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know.
No, she's just scoping out a story and kind of wanted to keep focusing on, but aren't a bunch of LLCs buying your units and taking them away? Trying to explain that Aspen wasn't really the same market or housing program that other communities have.
Very
See what
cool.
happens.
Okay, well,
Housing.
with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Oh,
Rachel, are you seconding it?
Second.
Seconding it. Roll call
Roll
vote?
call vote.
John,
aye.
Rachel,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Allison.
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned, 6:23.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Be safe out there. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
No, I was thinking of
First lose, baby. So we're buying, I think, buying another unit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just ran across one.